coming off the back of that story, I beg your pardon, how low is low?
Low is relative. It depends on where and who. Because what could be low at the outskirts of Nairobi may not be low in Karen, or it may, the other way around.
Yes.
Yes.
And you mentioned some of the costs that are included, and you said it's not 100%, construction costs only. And earlier on, when I was doing the big picture on our video wall, I did a breakdown of some of the things that contribute to the cost of the house. What are some of the items within that can be brought down in such a way that we can have space for low-cost housing?
The cost of land, the total cost of a house, there's the cost of land, the materials, the cost of finance, the labor, and the materials vary depending on the type of finishes. Land also varies. The cost of half an acre in Kilimani and the cost of half an acre in Ruiru, they will definitely change the landscape.
Moses, you've just got into this market, and we've just seen your story there with the two-bedroom house at 1.5 million shillings. Possible. Can it go lower than that?
I think it could. One, we would need to do try and get some economies of scale. I think when everybody is building a unique house and very specialized to them, then of course everybody's got the costs then spiral up. As he has said, cost of land, not much we can do about that sitting here. Cost of finance, again, it's not something I can do, but at Koto Housing then we decided let's tackle the cost of materials by reducing the cost of materials and the time spent. And that's how we are able to do the house in a shorter period and at a better cost. Yeah.
We'll come back to that in a bit, but I just want to bring in Carol into the conversation, especially from the financing bit. And before we started our conversation, you said you're very keen on getting to a time where Kenyans will actually be able to access mortgages at one digit. Do you see that ever happening?
It will happen. There's a lot that's being done in terms of just allowing access to cheaper funding. If we could actually bring in our pension funds into the picture, and also the insurance companies investing in that instead of commercial buildings, we can then begin to get closer to that. But perhaps in the interim, we may have to rely on foreign funding to enable us get to much cheaper funding. But for now, where the banks are relying primarily on customer deposits, it becomes a big challenge because they're using short-term funds to finance a very long-term asset.
Nyakundi, what options do Kenyans have when it comes to constructing low-cost housing?
Well, the Kenyans are very creative. They're getting into chamas.
Yes.
They get into circles. They're buying land in bulk and they subdivide among themselves so that they try to cut down the cost. But also Kenyans have some hurdles which are almost insurmountable. When it comes to dealing, let's say, acquiring the land, even acquiring materials for construction, there are so many brokers. It's so difficult to know the actual price for a lay person unless you've been in the industry for long. Also, Kenyans have a way of taking shortcuts. If they could use consultants, those who understand the industry, they could benefit a lot.
And we've seen, of course, what shortcuts have done to us in the past. And this brings in the issue of durability of some of the houses, especially Moses. Maybe you can talk to us at this point. How durable are those homes?
Well, I can tell you that house is going to outlive me and probably outlive my children.
That depends on how long you have to live.
Well, I can assure you it'll be here for the next 50 years or more. But because technically it's a normal house like any other. Yeah? The only difference is instead of building it brick by brick, we are using a panel, which then takes the case of a few bricks. But this panel is made of polystyrene, which is inert, so it's not gonna decompose. It's not gonna be affected by termites or any other thing or weather. And then it's got a fiber cement finish. So it's got the same finish as a normal everyday house, what we call a conventional house.
Is it tried and tested in any other market?
It's tried and tested. That type of building is quite big in the Southeast Asia, in Malaysia, in places like Korea, Indonesia, and Philippines, which is where we've actually imported the technology from. After going there, seeing houses that have been standing for 20 years in a similar technology.
Carol, now despite private sector growth within especially the upper and middle class housing sector, the lower income bracket has been ignored completely. And I'm just wondering, how attractive is it, given that, you know, a large chunk of these people cannot actually afford to take a regular mortgage as they are today?
I think it's a very viable sector, and given the rate of urbanization, we'll continue to see an increased demand in that sector. Where you look at, by 2030, perhaps over 50% of Kenyans will be living in cities. So when you consider that demand, and when you look at the current supply of about 30 to 50,000, there's always a debate about how many are produced in a year. Then you can just see that there's such a big gap, and we shall continue to have increased housing demand. So we do need to to approach that sector.
Nyakundi, I'm just curious, what materials constitute low-income housing, apart from what Moses has told us?
A lot of emphasis has been placed on walling materials, but you also need to look at the roof covering, look at the ceiling, look at the floor finishes, the floor tiles, the type of cupboards that you're putting into the house, the type of doors. All these, they contribute to the cost of the house. Yes.
And are there cheaper options? Which are the cheaper options?
Research, the former Minister of Housing did some research on wall materials. We have other people who have come up with walling materials. A lot of research has gone into that. If you go to places like Kisii, you'll find the burnt bricks, which are quite affordable. It's this kind of technologies that we need to bring into. And what our colleague here is doing, and others, is what really should be encouraged. We should encourage production in large quantities, not just for local consumption, but export to the neighboring countries. So with the large productions, then we should have costs coming down.
And we've seen a large number of players now just coming in. National Housing setting up a 700 million shilling plant, EGH in Naivasha, Housing Finance, Mabati Rolling Mills also expressing interest into the prefab market. What impact do you think this is going to have, Carol? Then Moses, I'd like you to answer that as well.
You know, Kenyans are peculiar people. The fact is, Kenyans want a solid wall. So by the time you start selling new technology, it will take quite a while for Kenyans to accept that as a norm. But even with normal stone, you can actually achieve quite low-cost housing. So I think that while the impact of the houses that will bring in, the technology is bringing in, will come into play, there are also other factors like infrastructure, which could really contribute to lowering the cost of housing.
Moses?
Well, I agree. What we are trying to do is, we're not just dealing with the walling, we're also dealing with the issues of the foundation, we're dealing with the issues of the roofing, and also with that issue of the finishes. What we have learned in the short period we've been in the market is people want a turnkey. So they want to come to Koto Housing and say, I want a house for this amount of money. So they want me to deal with the house, the painting, everything.
Yes.
And that's what people want. But going also back to what she said, the people who we are saying cannot afford are living somewhere. And so they're actually paying somebody who's actually making some money out of them. So if we were able to get them a house and I think earlier off camera she was saying, the point when we reduce the gap between mortgage and rent, then I think the eureka moment will be there. And that's what we're trying to do.
And that moment is what we all are waiting for. Now, we have to wind up now, unfortunately. Moses Nderitu, entrepreneur, co-founder of Koto Housing, Caroline Kariuki, CEO of the mortgage company, Harold Nyakundi, a quantity surveyor, as well as the chairman of the Joint Building Council. Thank you so much all for telling us how we can be able to construct low-cost houses for ourselves. Well, we're taking a short break now. We will be back shortly.